Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ for the feast of the dedication of the Basilica of St. John Lateran in Rome. From the Gospel according to John. Since the Passover of the Jews was near, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple area those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, as well as the money changers seated there. He made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple area with the sheep and oxen, and spilled the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who sold doves, he said, "Take these out of here, and stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples recalled the words of Scripture, "Zeal for your house will consume me." At this, the Jewish leaders said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" And Jesus said to them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. Therefore, when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they came to believe the Scripture and the word Jesus had spoken. The good news of the Lord. Many people may think that St. Peter's Basilica is the Pope's main church in Rome. After all, that's the one you see in the news from time to time. But actually, it is the Church of St. John Lateran, which is the cathedral, and the Pope's church as Bishop of the Diocese of Rome. To explain this, and today's feast, a brief bit of history. The first church on this site was built in the 4th century when the Emperor Constantine gave land he had received from the wealthy Lateran family to the Christians in Rome. That church, and others which replaced it, suffered over the centuries from fire, earthquakes, and war, but it remained the church where popes were consecrated and lived. When ongoing deterioration made it unlivable, the popes took up residency at the Basilica of St. Mary in Trastevere, and later at the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Eventually, what we know today as the Vatican was constructed, and it has been the Pope's residence into the present time. However, the official cathedral of the Diocese of Rome remains the Church of St. John Lateran. The current Lateran Basilica was erected in 1646 on the same land given to the church by Constantine some 1,300 years earlier. But as Father Ron Rollheiser explains, this feast has a much deeper significance, which he summarizes this way. No one, be that an individual or an institution, controls access to God. Jesus makes this abundantly clear several times, including the story we've just heard, the cleansing of the temple. This action, which may seem surprising coming from Jesus, can best be understood in this context. As he does several times, Jesus is replacing a former religious practice with a new way of doing things. And he is revealing something very important about God as he does this. To state it metaphorically, Jesus is replacing a former religious currency with a new religious currency. He comes into the temple area where the money changers have set themselves up for business, overturns their tables, and drives the money changers and other merchants out with the words, "Take all of this out of here and stop using my Father's house as a market." It's important to recognize that those money changers performed a needed function. People came to Jerusalem from many different countries to worship at the temple. But they carried the coins of their own countries and, upon arriving at the temple, had to exchange their own coins for Jewish coins, so as to be able to buy the doves, sheep, or cattle they needed to offer sacrifice. The money changers fulfilled that function. Like banking kiosks do today when you step off an airplane in a foreign country and you need to exchange some of your currency for the currency of that country. Now, of course, some of these money changers were less than honest, but that wasn't the real reason why Jesus reacted so strongly. Nor was he unduly scandalized because commerce was happening in a holy place. When Jesus says, "Take all of this out of here and stop using my Father's house as a market," he is teaching something beyond the need to be honest and beyond the need to not be buying and selling on church property. More deeply, not turning the Father's house into a market might be translated as, you don't need to exchange your own currency for any other currency when it comes to worshiping God. You can worship God in your own way with whatever you have and whoever you are. Nobody, no individual, no temple, no church, no institution, nothing can stand between you and God and say, you must go through us. That's a strong teaching that doesn't sit well with many of us. It immediately posits the question, what about the church? Isn't it necessary for salvation? That question is even more poignant today in an age wherein many sincere people already take for granted that they have no need of the church, identifying themselves as spiritual but not religious. Granted, there's a danger in affirming and emphasizing this teaching of Jesus, but, and this is the point, this teaching was not directed toward those in Jesus' time who said, "I am spiritual but not religious." Rather, it was addressed to religious individuals and a religious institution that believed that the way to God had to go through a very particular channel over which they had control. All religious currency had to be transferred into their particular currency since, in their belief, they controlled access to God. Jesus tries to cleanse us of any attitude or practice that would enshrine that belief. This does not deny either the legitimacy or necessity of the church, nor of those who minister in its name. God does work through the church and its ministers, but this does deny all legitimacy to the claim that the church and those who minister in its name control access to God. No one controls access to God. And no one can limit the presence of God to any place, whether or not it is considered sacred. In Jewish folklore, there's a beautiful story about the place where the great temple in Jerusalem was built, the very temple Jesus cleansed. According to the legend, two brothers had adjoining farms. The older brother was married and had a family. The younger brother lived alone. When the harvest came, the younger brother said to himself, "My brother has a wife and children and many responsibilities. I'll help him by giving part of my harvest to his family." So, in the middle of the night, he slipped into his brother's barn and secretly filled his brother's bins with grain from his own harvest. Meanwhile, the married brother had a similar thought. My brother has no wife or children and leads a very lonely life. He has no one to care for him in the winter of his days. I'll take some of my grain and add it to his harvest, so he will never be in need. And so, during the night, the older brother secretly filled his brother's bin with grain from his bounty. For years, the brothers never knew why their grain supplies never dwindled, until one night they both set out for the other's barn at the same time. In the dark, they met, each carrying sacks of grain to fill the other's bin. They realized immediately what each had been doing all those years. They dropped their sacks and embraced. And on the spot where the brothers embraced, God directed that the altar of his temple be built. Here at last is the place where I will build my temple, God said. For where brothers meet in love, there my presence will be. Where brothers and sisters meet in love, be that in our homes, our workplaces, our places of worship, wherever we meet one another in love, there God's presence will be. One more thought. If you are free to attend your place of worship, you might offer a prayer for those who are being arrested while trying to do the same thing. Thanks for listening. If you know someone else who might be interested in these reflections, please feel free to share them. Feel free also to subscribe so that you can receive these automatically every weekend. You can do that at our website, which is www.justanother.disciple.com. Once again, www.justanother.disciple.com. Thanks very much for listening.